Hi, I hope I'm audible. Yes. Yeah, thank you for confirming. Just give me a minute so that I can join. I can start the session. Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, hi everyone. Thank you again for joining for today's session. So, we will be, yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and then ask, or you can type them in the chat box, which I will also go through simultaneously and then answer them. Okay, so with that, we'll start our session. Yeah, uh, just give me a sec. Just come back. Yeah, so yeah, let's start with the. Oh, I'm sorry. With these big five questions, I failed, forgot to edit some of the slides properly, but the questions have been modified. But yeah, let's just go through them one by one. Uh, yes. So, continental slope has a gradient of what degrees? So, if you remember, the continental slope is something. So, is the main continent that kind of extends up into the ocean. So, the slope of the continent, the once it starts dropping down, varies somewhere around between 2 to 5 degrees. Similarly, the low islands consisting of coral reefs surrounding a central depression is a definition of. So it's atoll. If you remember from previous session where we were discussing, we are seeing how they are formed. So it's when the volcanic island and the volcano kind of collapses, slows down, and then there is this ring of corals that forms around, and then that is what an atoll is. And deep valleys often cutting across continental shelves and slopes is a description of is a submarine canyon. So in the continental shelf diagram, if you remember, submarine canyon is something, it's a deep valley that just cuts down like by either river or something. So equal density curves are also called as isopycnal curves, isohaline, isothermal, isobuoyant. So these are isopycnal curves. Haline is for salinity, therm is for temperature. Salinity, haline, similarly. Which of these is a major feature of the ocean floor? So, ocean deep or trench, mid-oceanic ridges, seamounts, and atolls. So, oceanic deep or trenches are one of the major features that you can come across in ocean floor. So, yeah, just don't bother about those images. They are from previous session. I failed to edit them. Yeah. So, but which of these is not a primary force initiating and governing movement of ocean currents? So, if you remember, the ocean it's not static. There are oceanic currents that happens. So, which of the following is not? So, arrangement of course is not a primary force that initiates the ocean currents because there are major other factors that kind of are important. Relatively steep sided narrow deep basins is a description of oceanic trench. So these are basically, in the on the ocean floor they're just steep, narrow, and then very deep basins that are formed. If you have watched some of those images, they look pretty scary because they are very steep and then very narrow. Which of these is a minor feature? Guyot. And yeah, so that's all for the week 5 questions. But yeah, so in the meantime, we'll start little more about understanding some of the prominent geographical features of the Indian subcontinent and then associated wildlife, major wildlife with those ecosystems or habitats, right? uh, yep, keep feel free to pitch in. And yeah, let's have this today session as a kind of uh, interactive. So yeah, we all know how the Indian subcontinent is formed. So the Indian landmass, which used to be a separate landmass before it is what now currently in the Eurasian plate. So it was moving along and it collided with the Eurasian plate, right? And the when it was traveling across from the southern to the northern latitudes, it had passed through the equator, and that led to lot of time, equatorial climate in India's climatic pass. And even we have equatorial climate in the southern parts of India and even the northeastern parts of India. And there are evidence of this equatorial climate, either in terms of species that are distributed or in terms of fossil evidence and all, right? So this is how it formed. So the Indian landmass actually came and collided with the Asian plate, and what used to be the sea between them kind of drained out, and one plate went into the another, and that led to the formation of the Himalayas because of the upliftment of those plates. And then these Himalayas are kind of present in folds, right? This is what we already had discussed earlier, right? And this is what in those regions where the upliftment has happened looks like if you travel to Ladakh and Spiti, you see that most of these folds, what used to be the seabed of the Tethys Sea, has actually now risen, and then you can see all the seabed, the rocks from those, the layered rocks you get to see these days. So yeah, the continent that's how the continent was. uh, yeah, so because of, and then considering India is huge in terms of the expanse and the land mass, and there are different regions, and then there are different type of habitats that just start there, right? So there, according to the Rogers and Powers, this is the ecoregions or biogeographic zones classification of India. They classified India into roughly 10 zones, right? The first, let's just come from north to south. The first, Trans Himalayas, followed by Himalayas, right? And then Gangetic Plains, or and semi-arid region, deserts, peninsular India or Deccan Peninsula, the Western Ghats, the coastal plains, and the northeast, and the tiny chunks of islands. So the major part of the Indian subcontinent is predominantly the Deccan Peninsula, as you can see. But yeah, so these are the major classification, but there's sub classification also, and these are based on biogeography, or basically the geographic nature of the area, and and the the species or associated with those areas, right? Let's just go check on the especially the mountain ranges of India. So today we are going to discuss mostly about them. So yeah, since when we discuss about Himalayas, we should be able to understand the concept of fold mountains a little better. So what are fold mountains? So, any guesses on what are fold mountains? Anybody? What is it that comes to your mind when you think of fold mountains? Okay, uh, let's just go ahead then. So fold mountains, these are generally formed when two tectonic plates are pushed against in each other, and then the the landmass kinds of rises up as folds, right? And these generally result in formation of mountain ranges, not just a single or a bunch of mountains, because it's a huge landmass, and then it's very low, right? The contact where two tectonic plates actually push against each other. So in Himalayas, as you remember from this diagram, or if you are remembered, that's how they are formed. They are formed as a part of, as a result of collision of two plates. So Himalayas are fold mountains essentially. And yeah, and then they occurs in layers. If you see, uh, this is a photograph that was photographed from a place near to Masuri. So as you can see, there are multiple layers of mountains that you get to see. So the layers, these layers might not be in straight line, but they might be imperfect. But you can see that they kind of comes in rows because of the way these are folded. And yeah, so Himalayas, there are Himalayas are further classified into different sections, or based on the locations and different characters. Like as you go from south to north, the outermost range, it's not generally not referred to as Himalayas, they are just referred to as Shivaliks. And the start of Himalayas is actually called from this place called Lesser Himalayas. So, and then followed by Greater Himalayas and then the Trans Himalayas. So, how do they look like, right? Shivaliks, if you have gone to Doon Valley, Dehradun, or traveled across even to Jammu and all, you had to, even in Himachal also, you had to cross the Shivaliks to go to the interior of the Himalayas. So, on a cross section, how do they look like? So just outside of the plains, close to somewhere around this region is where the Shivaliks are, followed by lesser Himalayas, the greater Himalayas, or trans Himalayas, or sometimes they're also referred to as Tethys Himalayas and all, because that's where the sea has uplifted. And the Himalayas is not constant. It's the age of, he's the Himalayas are relatively younger compared to other mountain ranges in India, and the Himalayas are also still rising because the plates are still pushing against each other. They have not stopped, and that's why there are a lot of earthquakes, and most of the Himalayan region actually lies in one of those uh, prominent earthquake prone zones of India. So yeah, if you just look at this map, you should be able to kind of figure it out, or try to see from south to north. Yeah, if you follow the legend, so the lower is south, as you go up it's north, right? So along the southern boundary, we have the Shivaliks, right? On the western uh, part of northern India or the Himalayas, the Shivaliks are separated distinctly from the lesser Himalayas. But as you move to eastern India, uh, the Shivaliks tend to kind of merge with the lesser Himalayas, and they're not that distinct. So as you can see, this is the Shivaliks range that comes in Uttarakhand, right? Radhaji National Park. This is the this is around the Doon Valley, and dunes are generally valleys that are present between the Shivaliks and the Lesser Himalayas. And Dehradun is one such valley. And yeah, this is the river Yamuna, and this is the river Ganga, and then Haridwar should be somewhere around here. And similarly, if you move further north or further westwards, the Shivaliks are also slightly separated prominently, and yeah, these are the some famous dams: Pong Dam, Bhakranangal Dam, that you get to see all these huge chunks of water bodies. And followed by this is the lesser Himalayas that you get to see here, right? And then the greater Himalayas are these ranges that you can see. They are much more taller compared to the lesser Himalayas. Lesser Himalayas rises, and they can be, they are much more higher than Shivaliks, but greater Himalayas are way taller, right? If you look at lesser Himalayas, they can go up to 3,000 meters, but greater Himalayas, their rises above 5,000, and even the Everest also lies in the greater Himalayan range. So they are one of the taller mountain chains. And then followed by Trans Himalayas, right? This is just beyond the greater Himalayas, all this range. So Spiti, Ladakh, most of the Ladakh region comes under the Trans Himalayan region. And then we have the Tibetan Plateau. But India doesn't have much of the Tibetan Plateau, right? Yeah. So let's just go ahead and see how the Shivaliks looks like. Right, these are the outermost layers, and then if you have visited one of these national parks, like Rajaji National Park or Corbett Tiger Reserve, so these are predominantly present in the Shivaliks region. So you have these river beds, and most of these hills are made, as you can see, they are made up of just soil, because it's just upliftment of soil is what led to this formation of the Shivaliks. And the river beds are mostly dry, and as you can see, and occasionally there is water flow that just resurfaces at random places and then just goes down again. And these type of rivers sees, and then there is subterranean flow of water that happens mostly, and very rarely it surfaces post monsoon. You get to see a lot of water around, and these rivers are called as raos, in at least in Uttarakhand. So yeah, so this tract is also called as Bhaba tract because of the way it is. And then you get to see a lot of these rolling stones around in these places. So these are not really stable geographically, because it's not made up of it's made up of mostly of soil and rocks. Rocks means in smaller ones. So yeah, and some of the animals that you get to see here uh, include tigers, and yeah, yeah, can somebody identify this animal? Because this species is one of those species that you get to see in Shivaliks and in the lesser Himalayas also. uh, Anybody encountered this, or know the name of the species? So giving on the clues is, it's a species uh, that is a goat like, as you can see from the appearance. So Shivaliks is one of those range places where you get there is a good chance of sighting this mammal also. So yeah, since Yeah, so let's just go ahead. So that animal is called as Himalayan coral. So there are multiple species of coral, but this particular species is called Himalayan coral. So yeah, and other species, there are other species that you get to see are leopards, bears, and even elephants are one of the common species that you can encounter in these landscapes. Leopards also, right? And then yeah, lesser Himalayas. So it's from some of those regions, that's how the lesser Himalayas looks like. So this is in photographed in Uttarakhand, close to on the banks of River Yamuna, right? So yeah, you can see this them predominantly standing off in front of the tinier shivaliks that you can see on the close by, right? And these are generally smaller in size compared to the greater Himalayas, but these are the first set of Himalayan layers, or that you get to encounter once you cross the Shivaliks. Followed by greater Himalayas, the elevation of these regions are much more higher, and then they go beyond 8,000 meters, and yeah, and this is how some of those places in looks like. Uh, you have these nice alpine meadows that you get to encounter in the greater Himalayas, because above certain elevation, because of the wind, because of the temperature, because of other factors also, precipitation also, the vegetation is limited to shorter shrubs and grasses. Not many plants can survive in those elevations. So, but in the slightly lower elevations, we have these beautiful valleys with dispersing plants, nice coniferous forests or nice broadwood forests also. And these grasslands, or these meadows, sorry, these alpine meadows have different names across different regions. Like in Uttarakhand, they are also referred as bugyals, and they are very one of those productive areas in these high altitudes. And if yeah, there are other lot of species that are that you get to see in those areas, such as yeah, these two species. Guesses what these two species are. So the species onto the right, you get to encounter them both in the forests and also those alpine meadows. But where the forest transits into the alpine meadows is where you get to see them a lot. And this is also the state bird of Uttarakhand, if that might help. Any guesses of what this is? Or the mammal onto the left? So the mammal onto the left is much more common mammal. Okay, so no guesses then. So it is Himalayan monal, MONL, monal. So it's one of those very pretty, colorful birds, and female is equally pale and colorless. And to the left is it's called blue sheep or bharal, and it's interestingly enough, it's neither a sheep nor blue. It's in between goat and sheep, but it's not a sheep technically speaking. But it's not even blue. But I don't know why they named it blue sheep. So the species is predominantly seen around in those meadows, or the transition areas between forests and meadows, feeding on fruits and grasses. And they also extend up into the Trans Himalayas in Spiti and Ladakh also. And there are a variety, a plethora of mammals that you get to see in these landscapes, such as pikas, weasels, marmots also. Yeah. So going up further north are the Trans Himalayas. This is how they look like, and these are much more these are much more vegetation deprived in sense, because the greater Himalayas are much taller, and then there is hardly any monsoon, or the monsoon that just passes through them and then happen around here, right? And then these these ranges generally, yeah, it's kind of desert. It is often desert, referred to as cold deserts, because they're pretty cold, and there is hardly any vegetation, and the temperatures kind of vary pretty greatly in from day to night. And these landscapes are one of those they are such a cool and fascinating landscapes, and then they often looks like, you're on a different planet. It takes time for you to sink in that, that this is Earth itself, because some of the structures are such unique that we might not have encountered across much. And some of the species that we get to see in these areas include yaks, most of sometimes domesticated, sometimes even wild cats you get to see. The Himalayan ibex, which is one of those majestic mammals of this region. The kiang, or wild ass. There is snow leopard. There is Palace's cat. There is Eurasian lynx. Then there are a wide variety of mammals, and there are also unique birds that you get to see only in these landscapes. And these are one of those fragile landscapes, because there is hardly, so most of the water that happen, or the precipitation here happens in the late winter in the form of snow, and that is the snow melt water is what is running these landscapes. And going little down are the Aravalis, and they are predominantly spread across Rajasthan. As you might, if you have listened to the lecture, they are not particularly oriented like the Himalayas are, so that they can stop the monsoon, but they are oriented in north-south fashion, so they effectively don't stop much of the rains. And generally, southern Aravalis are much more, you know, wetter compared to the northern Aravalis that almost extend up to south of Delhi. And one of the highest mountains here is Mount Abu in Rajasthan. It's 1722 meters. And there are unique species, or there are species that are nowadays that you get to encounter only in these regions, such as this tiny little bird called green avadavat, that has been in pet trade for a long time, and then currently is protected, but there are very few places you get to see them apart from some of those mountains in Aravalis. And Aravalis are also, these are also one of those oldest mountain chains or mountain range in India, and these are also rich in a lot of other minerals also, so they are heavily exploited for those minerals. And the next prominent ones are the Eastern Ghats. This is a photo of the Eastern Ghats forest from Nalamala Hills. So yeah, these are relatively drier. If you have visited or saw the pictures of Western Ghats, compared to them, they're a lot more drier. But there's some regions in Eastern Ghats that are considerably wet. And yeah, and there are Western Ghats. These are all these are also one of the oldest mountain chains, and they also spread much of across the western coast of India. Right, Eastern Ghats are spread across the eastern coast, or at least the eastern side of India. And one of the unique habitats that you get to encounter in the Western Ghats are the Sola forests. Right, uh, if you have gone to places such as Coorg, or in Kerala, uh, Nilgiris, or even in Valparai plateaus. So these areas have some of those nice shola patches uh, that you get to see. So shola, what are sholas? Sholas are just stunted growth forests that kind of are present on the mountain tops as you go higher up onto the mountains, but they are predominantly restricted closer to the valleys. If you see here, so these guys you get to see mostly in the valleys, but as you go up, there is a transition into the grassland that happens, right? And so there is a dynamic equilibrium that is present between these forests and then the grasslands. So they don't intermix much, so there's a clear different kind of boundary. And then these shola patches, uh, shola patch together has both the forest and the grasslands, had predominantly occur in the southern western Ghats, but mostly in Kerala and Karnataka. But there are some places where you get to see even in the northern part of the western Ghats. So yeah, some of the species that you get to encounter in the sholas. So you might have heard of this phenomenon also, uh, called the mass blooming. So there is a species of plant that blooms across certain years called Nilkurinji. So it just paints the whole hill slopes bluish to purple, depending on the time of the age of the flower, right? So it has the seasonally, so it blooms in certain number of years. So the last time it bloomed was, I think, 3 4 years ago. And they're unique birds and mammals that you can see, such as this uh, mustelid called Nilgiri marten, which is one of those voracious predators, but they look so cool to just to watch. And endemic birds that you get to see in this shola forests itself, such as this Nilgiris shola kili. So you don't get to see them in the actual lowland forest, but only in those shola patches. And Nilgiri thar, so not the Mahindra Thar, it's Nilgiri Thar. Uh, so it's a unique mammal in terms of its distribution. So there is another species called Himalayan Thar. So that is predominantly seen in the greater Himalayas, right? But there is the closest relative of it is in the Western Ghats, in the southern Western Ghats, especially in the Nilgiris, so which is in Tamil Nadu, right? So the distribution is really unique, kind of, the way these two species would have to be present, such distinct or such distant locations. So one is in the Himalayas, one is in the southern Western Ghats, kind of it paints a unique picture, like, so it kind of suggests, these two mountain ranges should have to be connected for this species to have to disperse, or their ancestor to have to be dispersed to the southern part of the Western Ghats. So researchers assume that, during the last glacial maxima, when most of these mountain ranges were connected, that's when these species might their ancestor might have dispersed further south, and then led to the formation speciation into this species, separate species such as called Nilgiri. Okay, so yeah, I'll just stop here and then we'll just go slightly and have a look on a map, so where some of these mountain ranges actually look, and where all they are distributed, because Western Ghats and Eastern Ghats are really interesting to look at. So I hope you can see the screen here. So yeah, so as I was saying, let's just start around with, right. uh yeah, if you can see, so this is the Gangetic Plain, right? This is the Yamuna River, this is the Ganga River, and this is Shivaliks. Once you cross the Shivaliks, you are in the Doon Valley. One such Doon is Dehradun, and we have the lesser Himalayas. Here it's Masuri, Dhanolti, or if you go further into Shival, into the Himachal, your Solan, all these places, right? And then even the water bodies, you can say. And then if you go slightly north, you have the Greater Himalayas. And then you also famous dams on the rivers also. This is the Teri Dam, and then the Greater Himalayas, right? And then similarly, the Himalayas are also divided based on the location, at least in the Indian context. It's called the Western Himalayas versus the Eastern Himalayas. So the Western Himalayas is basically Kashmir, Himachal, and Uttarakhand, while the Eastern Himalayas is predominantly the Arunachal and Sikkim also. And then we have our neighbors Nepal and Bhutan also, which share most of these Himalayas. So yeah, so if you want to just go around and scroll around, watch them little more, you can do it on Google Earth, even on mobile app. There is a mobile app also. Okay, and then followed by Aravalis. So yeah, so just little south of Delhi and in Rajasthan. So this section. So yeah, these are Aravalis. And then northeast also have unique set of mountains, the Kasi Hills, Garo Hills, because once the Indian plate kind of collided here, and then there is a collision that also happened here, and then there is separate rising of the the landmass that also happened, and Eastern Ghats and Western Ghats, right? Western Ghats, as you can see, it kind of the shaded region. It kind of starts somewhere in the southern parts of Gujarat. They're very small parts in Gujarat. It runs along the western coastline, Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. And it can be roughly divided in, it is mostly divided into three regions: the northern western Ghats, the central western Ghats, and then the southern western Ghats. So the southern western Ghats is basically mostly the region that is present in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Central is Goa, Karnataka, and then the northern is Maharashtra and Gujarat. And then it's just not the state, it's, I'm just saying the states because that will be easy for remembering. But one of the major basis of the classification is the precipitation of these regions. So the northern western Ghats are much more drier compared to the southern western Ghats, and then central western Ghats are slightly intermediate in terms of the precipitation they receive. And the species also are also different in terms of composition, these northern, central, and western Ghats, southern. And then there is this important features called gaps, that separate different regions of western Ghats. Like the famous gap that you get to see is the Palghat gap, that is here. That's where the you know the connectivity between most the Kerala and then Tamil Nadu happens, right? And then we have Shenkota Gap, because these are the regions where there are no distinct, mountains or hills that are present, and there is just a gap, and there is just kind of a valley, very extended valley. And then these are also important in terms of uh, species distribution, because they regulate actual species distribution, because these gaps are important geographical barriers that prevent species from dispersing, or that has led to isolation of lot of species, and then subsequent speciation also, because groups such as frogs, centipedes, uh, studies on these groups have revealed this, even these gaps like Palghat gap has been prominent for uh, kind of leading to distinct species in certain groups. and we have Goa Gap, we have Shankoda Gap. But the prominent gaps, there are two prominent gaps in the Western Ghats. Is one Palghat Gap, and there is another gap somewhere around here. Yeah, and then so this is a kind of continuous mountain chain, but slightly broken at two three places, resulting in these gaps. But Eastern Ghats are not like that, right? Eastern Ghats are relatively much more broken down. They are not continuous as Western Ghats. So they start around, so Western Ghats and Eastern Ghats actually meet around, and then there's this place called in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. There's this tiger reserve called BRT Hills Tiger Reserve, Biligiri Ranga Hills Tiger Reserve. So that's where that's kind of in the transition zone of Eastern and Western Ghats. And then there are few hills in the east Tamil Nadu also, followed by Nalamala Hills in Andhra Pradesh, and then see the gap that you get to see, and then followed. This is in the southern Andhra Pradesh, right? And then you there is much more longer gap, and then you have in the northern Andhra Pradesh and Odisha there are some hills, and then it just extends up into West Odisha also, northern parts of Odisha, and then some parts of Chhattisgarh also. So they are not kind of continuous like these Western Ghats. That is one of those important feature, one of the distinction that you see in Western versus Eastern Ghats. And yeah, so that's with some of those mountain ranges. Yeah, I would encourage you guys to go back when you have time to just go and check some of these mountain ranges again. And the another habitat that we have, and one of the most productive and important habitat in with when you think in terms of climate change, are the mangroves. These are coastal forests that have, the species, the plants have high salinity tolerance because there is a frequent inundation that happens. Like, there's special structures such as these uh, stilt roots, you know standing roots, or pneumatophores. The pneumatophores are the roots just go back and then come up out of the soil. They stick up so that they can breathe in these highly saturated soils or inundated water also. And then there is adaptation of a lot of these species also, is that is vivipary, right? That is the seeds kind of develop uh, into adults. They kind of germinate on the mother plant itself, and then they fall down. So that kind of gives them a head start when they are when they want to survive. And these species are kind of, you know these mangroves are predominantly present along the tropical areas, and they are, they act as nursery ground for a lot of fishes, because these are these regions where, a lot of predators might not be easy to come and then catch them. And they also store a lot of carbon. So that's why people these days, countries are trying to advocate wherever they have mangroves to save them, so that they can get carbon credits. They can sell these carbon credits to other countries for other things, right? So in India we have these mangroves uh, across our coasts. So these mangroves are predominantly present in most of the deltas in larger numbers. So Sundarbans is one of those bigger areas where, that has the largest mangroves in the whole world as such. And yeah, these are all whole mangroves. And then we have other regions also. We have Mahanadi Delta in Odisha, where you get, so this is the Mahanadi Delta where you get to see a lot of mangroves. And yeah, even if you come down further into the Godavari and Krishna Delta, you have uh, Koringa mangroves, which is the second largest mangroves region in India, at least. And then we have mangroves further south also, and even on the western coast, even along Mumbai also we have mangroves, but they are slightly smaller or present in smaller areas than the size of mangroves forest that we get to encounter on the eastern coast, right? And these are such a unique habitat that they have this own set of species, and these species are such fascinating to just watch and admire. uh, we have these larger species such as saltwater crocodiles, especially on the eastern coast of India. This is a saltwater crocodile basking in Bhitarkanika. So they grow pretty large, and they are, yeah, they're not really pretty to encounter if you are on foot. They because they're pretty scary to watch, but they can be docile also. And these two animals are kind of stars of the mangroves across the world. There are a lot of species of this species. These are called mud skippers, and they're one of those beautiful looking fish. They have adaptations, kind of, they have these unique type of burrows they make, and where they can, kind of prevent, they can have air pockets during high tides, so that they can go back into the burrows, and then they can live for till the high tide kind of goes back, and then again surface, and then they forage during the low tides. That's when you get to encounter them a lot. And they are this one of the stronger uh, pelvic fins, sorry, pectoral fins, I'm sorry, the fins that they kind of use to walk around on the mud also. And then they are beautifully colored. There are a lot of species of mud skippers in India also. And then on the other hand, we have this group called fiddler crabs. So here the males have this huge, one of their claws is so huge, they kind of use it to display for females, and also to fight each other males for females. And females generally have these tiny claws only. So yeah, they just use their tiny functional claw for eating and all other purposes, and for display and fighting they use these bigger red claws. So they are present, they are scattered across all these intertidal zones in these mangrove habitats. And then we have a unique bird present in the Indian mangroves, especially in the Sundarban regions and till Bhitarkanika at least. It's called mangrove pitta. It's like Indian pitta. It's a pitta that is restricted to the mangroves. So these are some of those fauna that you encounter in mangroves. And then there are a lot of snakes also. There are a lot of mammals you get to see also. There are a lot of mammals that have adapted nowadays to survive in the mangroves, because it's not easy. Yeah, that's all. Uh, yeah, I had for today. So, and then these are one of those beautiful habitats just to visit and enjoy the beauty. So, yeah, if you guys have any questions, I would be happy to take. Yeah, any questions or. So yeah, I just saying you can visit Google Earth. If you have a laptop, you can download this app also, or you can just visit the online version of Google Earth. and then you can scroll around and see different hill ranges in India. So Chirapunji, if you remember, is one of those regions in India where you get the highest amount of rainfall. It's one of those regions in the world also where you get one of highest amounts of rainfall. Right. It is because of the location it is in. Because southwest monsoon goes, and there is the disturbances that happens from Bay of Bengal that can also go, and then it's kind of it kind of properly blocks most of the precipitation that goes around. So it kind of is one of the rainiest places in the country. So yeah. So any questions, I would be happy to answer, or else yeah, that should be the end of today's session. So if you have any questions regarding Unit 7 biodiversity. Okay, so you have doubts about the calculation of this index, right? So yeah, I can do it with an example so that you can better understand. So maybe we can. I think uh, I have not gone through the lecture yet, but uh, I think there are multiple index Simpsons and Shannons. Both of them are dealt, right? So if both are there, I will try to. Uh, we can do have a session here where we can try to solve them here with an example. Okay, yeah, it's okay. We'll go through all of those indices because some there that's slightly confusing also, and they they can be slightly confusing, but yeah, they can easily. It will be better if you do it with an example. We can do it with an example in the next session. Okay, any yeah, thank you. Any other requests? Yeah, please unmute yourself and ask. Yeah, Aditya, you can ask if you have any questions. Or you any topic that you want me to cover in the next session? Because you raised your hand as asking. Okay. Uh, ठीक है. Then yeah, it seems no one has any questions or requests for clarifications, and we'll touch upon those diversity indices with examples as one of you has requested in the next session. Till then, yeah, that's it. We'll stop here for today's session. Thank you guys. Thank you for joining. You can, yeah, we can leave. Or if you have anything, I'll be here for a couple of minutes. You can ask. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, any feedback or suggestions you guys have for me regarding the sessions, I'd be happy to try to incorporate them in the next session. If you have anything, you can let me know here. If not, yeah, that's up to you. But anyway, yeah, that should be the end of today's session. Yeah, thank you and bye. You can leave.